Just because you have a Cricut Joy doesn't mean that you can't make use of fun features like scoring. I'm going to cover 3 different methods that you can use to score with your Cricut Joy. My name is Kelly Rossouw, and let's get clacking. One of the methods uses the foiling tool. 2 of the methods use just the normal standard blade to cut things. The first method that I'm going to cover for me is the easiest and kind of gets the best results, and that is using the Cricut Joy foiling tip. This foiling tool comes with only one thickness, and that is the medium thickness. So you won't be able to choose between the 3 attachments like you have on the larger machines. And of course this tip will work in both the Cricut Joy and the Cricut Joy Extra. So both of these methods you'll be able to use for either of the Joy machines. To go over the basic principles, we're just going to make a card, because it only has one basic score line. So I'm going to click on Shapes, add a square to my canvas, unlock the proportions of the square, and change the width to 4.25 inches or 10.8 centimeters. And the height, you can make whatever size you want to have your card. And I want to make a nice square card, so I'm going to make the height 8.5 inches. The next shape that we're going to add to the canvas is the one in the top left-hand corner, and that's just a simple line. I'm going to rotate the line 90 degrees by moving my mouse just away from the little white block and holding in Shift so that it stays perpendicular. I'm then going to change the length of the line in the height column to 4.25 because that is the width of our card. With the line selected, you will go to the Operations section in the top left-hand side of your screen. Click on the drop-down where it says Basic Cut and change that to Foil. Now with the score line selected, I'm going to select the square as well. I'm going to click Align and then Center. We're going to then come down to the bottom right of our screen and click Attach. And now you have the base of your card, so you can add whatever it is that you want on your card. If you want to have something fun on the front, you can totally add that there. I'm going to add a fun sentiment onto my card, make it a little bit smaller so that it fits, center it on my card, and then attach that as well. So now what it'll do is it'll draw as well as score the line for my card. If you ever get the pen incompatible error on your Cricut Joy when you're working with a project, come to the Operations section, change it from pen to something else, it doesn't matter, and then change it back to pen, and now the error will have gone. And from there, going to click Make, and you will see it loads it automatically onto my 30 centimeter or my 12-inch Cricut Joy mat. So I'm going to click Continue, connect to my Joy, select the material that we're going to be cutting, and then we can move over to the machine to actually make the project. So now that we have set up our design in Design Space, I'm going to load my cardstock onto my mat. And Cricut Design Space is telling me to load in my pen first, so I'm going to take my blade out and load in my pen. Now that it's finished drawing everything, we can take out our pen, and now is where we add in our foiling tool. It also wants us to essentially add the foil, but we're not going to add anything else because we don't need to foil anything. So now that that has been added, I'm going to click Go on my screen, and it's going to essentially score the line for us. Now it'll come back to the center, and now what we do is we take out the foiling tool, and we add in our fine point blade, and we click Go on our screen again. And now that it's done, we can just unload the mat, take our card off the mat, and you should be able to see a faint line on the cardstock there. That is our score line. So we can just fold the card and score it there. It will be quite a light line. If you find that you have maybe a thicker cardstock and it's not scoring quite as well, add 2 or 3 score lines to it and then it should work quite well. But even still, it works really well for projects like this. If you are new to Cardstock Crafts, I've created a Cricut Card Stock Jumpstart workbook. It has over 60 pages of information, including tips, tricks, methods, step-by-step workflows, all relating to cardstock crafts for beginners. That includes this method that I'm explaining here today. So if you are not quite sure on which cardstock you want to use, which mat you need to use, whether you need to be using the scoring wheel or the scoring stylus, what accessories you may need for your Cricut cardstock projects, then this workbook explains all of that and so much more for only $19. And if you want a discount code to get it a little bit cheaper, sign up to my mailing list below and I will send you a discount code. I know you'll love it just as much as these people have loved it, so go ahead and enjoy. The second and third methods of scoring on your Cricut Joy use your fine point blade. These are not my favorite methods to use because of the way that the project looks at the end of it, and it is also quite tricky to set up. But if you don't have the foiling tool, then these options are ones that you can use with just your standard blade. So in Design Space, if you're making just a normal card base, we're going to use that as the examples throughout. So I'm going to add, again, a 4.25 by 8.5 inch square. So we're once again going to click on Shapes and use the line to create our score lines, but we're doing it in a different way. I'm first going to rotate the line so that it is horizontal, and then reduce the size of this line to about 0.2 inches or so. I'm then going to right-click, duplicate, select both of those, right-click, duplicate, until we have about 8 of them. I'm then going to select all of those lines, come to the Align panel and align them center vertically, and then go back to the Align panel and distribute them horizontally so that they're all equally spaced. I'm then going to attach them together so that they all stay together and I don't have to worry about deselecting it and reselecting them. Now we want to make the size fit our card. So I'm going to change the width from 3.6 to around 4 inches. And I'm not going to do the full width of the card, so I'm not going to do 4.25 because I don't like having my cut lines at the top and the bottom of the card. I like that part to still be joined together. Because these cut lines are actually going to cut through the card, I don't want to have the cut through sections at the top and the bottom, if that makes sense. So I'm going to move this over onto my card, select both of them, align and center. And now when you zoom in, you'll be able to see exactly where the cut lines lie. And as you can see, just that little section there won't be cut. It gives the card more strength and more resilience, so I prefer that method. We then want to make sure to attach that together as well so that everything stays where it should. The second one that we're going to be cutting, and I have this setting set to medium cardstock. And we can easily remove it from the mat. And you can see the little dashed lines that we have across, and you can fold it in there like that. And the reason why this again isn't one of my favorites is because you can clearly see it doesn't look as neat on the score line itself. So while it does work and it's a very easy route to take, it doesn't look very nice. The next method I'm also going to use on the same card size just so that we keep it all the same. So here is where we're going to use again the same line but in a different way. So I'm going to add again another line to the canvas, rotate it so that it is horizontal, change the width so that it is 4.25, so we're working with the same elements, and move it kind of to the middle of the card. And again, we're not going to change the function of that line, but what we're rather going to do is do a double cut or a triple cut on the outside border and use a lighter cut setting on the single line so that it doesn't cut as heavily. So I'm going to right click on our card base, the rectangle. I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to right click and duplicate that again. So that we have 3 of those rectangles and 1 cut line in the middle. The cut line I'm going to right click and bring it to the front so that I can see it. I'm then going to select all 4 of those elements. So we have the 3 squares and the single cut line. Again, we're going to align and center so that they're all on top of each other. So what this will do is Cricut will actually think that it's 3 separate objects, and it'll cut the square 3 times. Because we're going to be using a lighter pressure setting, we're going to need to cut through a few times in order to make sure that separates. You may need to play around with this a little bit depending on the cut setting you're using, the blade health, and how many squares you've used. You might need only 2 squares, you might need 3. Play around with it and see how this works for you if you don't want to have the jagged cut lines, which it's my least favorite. But this one is a lot more tricky, but once you've figured out the settings, then it works quite nicely for you. And you can then click attach to those. And once you've got all of this set up, I'm going to click make, continue. And when it comes to selecting our materials, we're going to click browse all materials and add our own custom material, because none of the materials are using the lightest pressure setting. So at the bottom left hand side of your screen, you'll see it says material settings. We're going to click on that and then again scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page where it says add new material. Now I'm going to give this one a custom name based on medium cardstock. So I'm going to call it medium cardstock. And then I'm also going to add the word scoring on the end so that I know that this is the setting that I want to use with the scoring option. And I'm going to click save. This little green line shows the pressure setting that it's going to use. So I'm going to click on the dot and drag it all the way to the bottom so that it is set at 70. And then I'm going to click save. Now we have the lowest scoring pressure that we can use. I'm going to click the X on the materials, go back to browse all materials and find my custom material by going to my materials. Once I've selected the material, I'm going to click done. And I've even changed the pressure setting to less pressure. So it's going to first start with a light cut in the middle and then cut 3 squares on the outside. And once it's done, we can unload it. And I checked it on the second cut. Even on the second pass, it had cut through. So we can take this off and then we have our score line there. But you can see it's pretty much almost cut directly through the paper. This paper is hanging on by a thread, so any kind of tearing or anything like that would probably separate this. So this, like I said, this is not my favorite one because the room for error is very, very small. My blade is fairly new, so if you have a dull blade, you would probably want to use it for this method. So as far as our options go, we have the one with the dotted lines. We have the very light cut that cuts almost through the paper if you've got a very sharp blade. And we've got the one that may not fold as well, but kind of does the best job, in my opinion, out of the 3 options that we have here. The Joy is such a versatile machine and you shouldn't feel too limited when you have one. Maybe a little bit when it comes to the size, but it's still a really, really great machine. But if you want to learn how to cut faux leather with your Joy, check out this video on the screen here. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos in the future, and remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon!